So welcome everybody to a DASA Enterprise Leadership Forum webinar that we are hosting today on measuring software delivery performance with DORA. And DORA, as we know, DORA metrics and flow metrics address the need by providing objective data to measure the performance of software delivery teams and drive product improvement. And we do this by, measuring it with DORA metrics, which hopefully we will be discussing today, the 4 metrics plus perhaps one more. So Irfan will be leading the conversation today, who I will introduce in a minute. But before that, just a little bit of housekeeping. If I switch to the next. And my name is Katrina Logie, and I'm your host today. So I will be answering your questions and interjecting with the speakers. Please do write your comments and questions in the chat that is provided on this webinar. And as I mentioned, we will read them out during the discussion. And we would be very happy to hear from you if you would like to contribute as a speaker for DASA webinars, or even co-brand a webinar. We would love to hear from you and what you would like to talk about related to topics that are relevant today in the DevOps field. We are also organising an award ceremony next spring, and we are looking for nominees for DevOps teams. And you can find out more about that at devopsagileskills.org. This webinar is being recorded, and just an overview of the agenda. So I will introduce a little bit about DASA, and then I will hand over to Irfan to introduce the speakers, and we will then proceed with the webinar. So the ELF is designed for knowledge sharing amongst our global community. And stimulate ideas for the future. And DASA is the world's largest DevOps and Agile association, fostering dialogue, debate, and collaboration amongst leading industry professionals and organizations. With a network of over 300 partner organizations, DASA helps define, inform, and advance the DevOps industry through networking, information sharing, awards, as I mentioned earlier, lifelong learning, and certification. It was founded in 2016 with 300 plus partners in 48 countries and over 1,000 of professionals. So DASA offers the guidance, platforms, and community of experts to enable you to successfully navigate your transformation journey. And we do that through 4 key areas. One being guidance, by offering access to guidance materials that are created by the various working groups we have in place. These are aimed to help organizations refine their transformation journeys by learning from the successes of peers and the collective knowledge of experts. And this is in the form of best practices and DevOps maturity assessments. Also, communities are a powerful way to advance the movement of DevOps. And the DASA communities are designed to share new ideas, practical suggestions, insights, and lessons learned. And also, we have created a new education hub that contains a range of talent management resources designed to create a continuous learning culture for members and to help map your team's exact needs to optimize their development. And the final area is recognition and visibility, helping organizations to celebrate their successes and advancements via the awards, and helping organizations build employer branding to attract the right talent. And with all this in mind, we will now look into more detail. We will go into more detail, but I will, if you would like more detail, for more information on the DASA membership, please contact us at membership@devopsagileskills.org. Nope. So I'm going to introduce Irfan Sharif today, who is our DASA Research Director. And Irfan I will hand over to introduce our speakers today. Thank you, Felix Lopez, who is the software engineering and DevOps leader with Willis Towers Watson, Martin Gross, who is the DevOps coach at Fluxum Engineering, and Thomas Lepelampi is digital transformer at Efficode. So Irfan, over to you.
All right, super, and thank you, Katrina, and welcome, folks, and the speakers as well. And guys, thank you very much for joining us today. We hope to have a very interesting and interactive discussion with the audience on this very relevant topic. So I'm looking forward to you folks bringing your perspective and your experience to the conversation, as well as soliciting, the interaction from the audience here. I think we have folks joining as we speak. So welcome, folks, and we promise this will be a fun discussion and a useful discussion on a very relevant topic. So the topic we're going to be discussing is measuring software delivery performance, but through using the DORA metrics. But before we dive into that, what we would like to cover off is to understand why we need to care about this. So that is going to be the first sort of theme of our conversation, of why this is important and how you can improve it. And agile DevOps transformations are the ways to improve your software delivery performance. And with that, you drive organizational performance. But most organizations don't appear to realize all the benefits that are possible. So we'll discuss, as the next part of our conversation, what are the anti-patterns that are preventing folks from getting all the benefits of a transformation. So with that sort of segue, we'll move on and talk about the third theme, which is around the role of culture and leadership, because often they are either minimized or forgotten. But without the cultural and the leadership transformation, DevOps journey is unfulfilled and it won't reach its destination. And we'll talk about the role of culture and transformational leadership in making a DevOps journey successful. So with that sort of preface, I want to now pass it on to our speakers. I'll go around the table and I request them to introduce themselves. And then once they've introduced themselves, we'll follow this format where we will have a conversation on the themes that I mentioned. And we will also be looking, while we are having these conversations, for participation from the audience and questions that they may have, and we will weave them into the conversation. So with that, folks, I will now invite, perhaps starting with my left, with Thomas, for a quick introduction, Thomas, and then we'll move on to Martin.
Thank you, Irfan. So nice to kind of meet you, everyone. Thomas Leppilampi from Efficode, 20 plus years in software business, and I'm a DevOps team lead in Efficode. So I have 20 people in my team who probably know more about DevOps ins and outs than me, but that makes me a very happy person. My mom once said, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you are in the wrong room. So I'm also happy to be here today with these gentlemen. So please, Martin, for an example.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Ivan and Katrina. Yeah, just a little bit of background for me. I was working as a software developer for more than 15 years, so I know really from first-hand the problems which are occurring usually in projects and if you develop products. Nowadays, I'm not developing software every day anymore, sometimes a little bit if I have some spare time, but yeah, I really like to be connected with the teams, really. And yeah, I'm working as an independent software coach, DevOps coach, and it's a lot of fun. And it's also very interesting what the research shows in the last year. So DORA, for example, they did a lot of research, and that's really exciting to apply this new knowledge to help software developers and operations teams and organizations to get better at delivering products. Yeah, thank you. Maybe Felix now.
Thank you, Martin. Hi, I'm Felix Lopez. I'm the software engineering, DevOps, and SRE leader within the work and reward business at Willis Towers Watson. I've been in the industry for 20 years or 20 plus years. But specifically, my area of expertise has really revolved around the DevOps area for the past 10 years. I've gone through at least 2 transformations at a large enterprise business. So a lot of experience around that, a lot of experience in terms of measuring and providing guidance on how to mature the organization, make the software development process a lot quicker. So just a lot of passion around that area, but I also have the software engineering umbrella. So, but my passion still is DevOps.
All right, it's fantastic, and it's kind of humbling as well to have you folks in the room, and thank you, Thomas, for the catchy phrase there. If you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. We've got a lot of smart people in the audience as well, so obviously we're all in good company here, and we're looking forward to bringing your perspective and the teams that you work with on a regular basis. Similarly, Martin comes with a lot of software background and development background, and he's been in the weeds there, as they say. And Felix obviously brings a lot of perspective, both from a software engineering perspective and now as a DevOps and SRE leader. So welcome, folks, and we want to talk about software delivery performance and the fact that why it is important. I think if you want to draw the analogy, software was typically delivered through CDs, right? And that was the way it has been for a while back now. So the world has moved on from delivering software on CD to a world where software is delivered continuously and sort of consumed continuously. So perhaps we can start with why this has suddenly become important and all the sort of business context around the digital disruption that is going on, and why software delivery performance matters and how you measure it and how you improve it. Maybe we can start with Thomas from a perspective of what he sees with his customers, the challenges and the opportunities here.
Excellent. Thanks, Irfan. So I've worked with some companies that are, so to say, born agile, so that they have, in their DNA, it's important to measure, and it's important to look at, quick or rapid cadence of delivery and all that. But I also worked with companies whose main KPI is that there is zero downtime and zero incidents in production, and it's very important that nothing goes wrong in production. They don't care if it's like many months between the updates, as long as their production stays up all the time. And those different industries, I think, lend a lot into this discussion. For me, in the past, we were looking at mean time to failure. We didn't want to fail in any case, but these days with Netflix, doing kind of chaos engineering, and everybody can push their commits directly to production if it goes through all the gates and if it goes through the pipeline, then this kind of different kind of phenomena is giving us a lot of insight into the metrics and software delivery performance themselves. So I think DORA and the software delivery performance framework give us a great possibility to discuss, what is the best way for a specific company to measure what is good performance for them. But it doesn't give us a silver bullet into measurement that works for everyone. So the way I've seen it, it's very important to find the KPIs and the measurements, even within the KPIs that DORA provides us for that company and that business specifically. And this is why I'm very interested in hearing what are your, Felix and Martin, your views from practical point of view for measurement. Because for me, it's been very varied, from companies that it's okay to fail in production as long as you recover in less than 5 seconds, to companies that specifically do not. They measure with something called first pass yield. If the production line has even a single defect that we don't know of, then the system will not go to production. So it's I think it's a very varied discussion. I'm very much looking forward to hearing Martin and Felix your views on this as well.
All right, with that, maybe Martin can chime in.
Yeah, you're right. It can be quite a big difference between the, let's say, younger companies which are really just started in agile and maybe have really still some hands-on experience that they were building up their servers themselves or directly started in the cloud. So that cloud is also a point which promotes DevOps practices, because you have to configure something, and it's more like an automatic process, and that helps to automate everything. I'm usually working a lot with bigger corporations, and there you usually find that they do a release like every quarter or only once half a year. So that's a complete different world, and you have change advisory boards, and it's also the change processes are really usually a lot of people are involved, and everything is slower, and that alone is already preventing companies from deploying, let's say, weekly, because the process around it is already quite involved. And there are some reasons for that, because they want to control the quality, for example, and quality is really very important. On the other hand, we have new practices, software practices, which can really help to ensure that we have the quality which we need. And so like automated testing, and also like that you're only deploying to some part of the user, not to everyone, so you can find usually problems quite early. So a lot of practices evolve around quality, and if you use them, then you're already much better. And that's my point of view. So you can, DORA metrics are based on the research which was done by DevOps Research and Assessment. And they found out in their statistics also that even the industries which are regulated, there was not a big difference. They could also achieve like high performance levels. So it's not really an industry issue, but I think it's more like the grown processes which you have in your company. And if you can change that, and of course, what environment do the developers and the operations people have? So how can they work? And is it really, does management really want that they are working together? So that's also one point which I see sometimes.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and very, very quickly, Martin, I think in terms of what the external drivers for some of these changes is, do you hear or see a lot of these conversations around we need to change because we have this whole thing about digital disruption and new competitors coming into the market, so we have to improve our performance? Is that kind of a thing that you come across?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a lot of pressure because of new companies which are entering the market and which have start on a green field. So they start with all what is required. Like they're already using fully agile approach. They're automating everything. They're starting directly in the cloud. And so they have this speed advantage, really. They're much faster. They can react quicker, and maybe they even have a better connection to their customers, a more direct connection. And I think that's also one important point for DevOps, that you have these fast feedback cycles. And that does not mean only from operations, but also from the customers, that you get feedback from the customers in the form that you see how the customers are using your product, that you really have because it can be a difference between what customers tell you and what they really do with your product. So it's really, I think, important to have this feedback as well.
Yeah.
And they might make some smaller mistakes, these newer companies, but they can fix it so quickly, so it doesn't really matter a lot. I mean, maybe for banking, it's a little bit different. You don't want to lose your money. But in the other areas, there are so many areas around that which are not so critical, where you could act much faster.
Nice. And that's a good segue, right? And your point about DevOps enabling sort of the what feedback from the customer and enhancing your product. I think that's the key. Now, operations is an input into design and development of your product, both the technical operation and customer, business operations. So that's a great point. And I think looping in Felix into the conversation. And Felix, you've been through a bunch of transformations and just trying to understand what is the key sort of business driver for these transformations and how you measured yourself along the journey and perhaps the role of DORA in helping you measure that.
Yeah, I can share a little bit. And it's funny because at an enterprise level, sometimes it's multiple applications, right? And each application is in a different journey from a DevOps perspective, right? So you can't say, hey, as an enterprise, you're all here. No, it varies per application. Some of the challenges coming in are, there's some that are greenfield, and very rarely do we get that opportunity. A lot of times they're existing businesses that you have to support. So it's trying to figure out what is the challenge, right? There's a lot of issues when you're releasing software, right? What's causing that, right? So really assessing from a maturity perspective where you are and what you want to do. But in the end, like you guys called it out, it's providing value back to the business as soon as you can and getting that rapid feedback, right? But then once you start having those conversations, how much does a business want to take on in terms of really adjusting or making changes to really improve some of that stuff? Because it takes time, right? And it takes investment, and it also takes releasing software a little bit quicker to get that feedback. So it's really figuring out what the appetite is from a business perspective to really do that transformation. And there's a lot of persuasion conversations that you have to have. And I think a lot of, as much, if you can really leverage tooling in terms of like assessments that you can bring on, that gives you information that you can provide so that you can say, hey, this is the benefit if you do this, right? But a lot of it has to do just conversations with the business and figuring out this is where we're at, this is where you want to get here, and this is what you're going to have to do. So those assessments really come in and are critical when you're having those conversations with them.
Yeah, no, it's an important point. Sorry, go ahead, please, Thomas.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in here because our transformation products in Efficode, because we're a DevOps company, we're literally 600 consultants, that have to do with something to do with DevOps, each one, and assessments are the cornerstone of our, of our activity. And Felix, I think you said well there that each application is in a different part of the journey. Actually, myself personally, I like to talk about capability more than maturity, because maturity feels like there's a a finite target where we're gonna hit. But as we all know, forever going to be improving. But anyway, the assessment for each application specifically, and the North Star for the company, but also real targets for each application, because nothing's more frustrating than trying to reach something that you will never do because you're being regulated. Martin, you said in banking there are areas that can be more capable or mature in DevOps than others, and identifying those differences is very important, because when you're assessing, you don't want to be trying to reach the same North Star with each application that you have. Some of your applications are relying business logic on mainframe or something, and the others might be some loan applications that are basically web portals, and those are completely different from the level of capability of DevOps that they can achieve. So I think that's very good takeaway here, is that do not treat your applications like equally because they are very unique.
Yeah. And it's always context, right? It's the context matters. And I think the business context matters most. And I think Felix talked about the challenge in persuading the business to come along the journey. right? They have to make some investments, both in time and in terms of dollars to build that capacity and capability. So I think DevOps has now kind of moved on from just a tooling sort of conversation to how can we drive some business results with that. And the context is that each application has its own sort of metrics associated with that, and it's going to be fit for purpose. Was there anything else on this topic that Martin or Felix wanted to add in terms of software delivery performance, its context within the business, before we move on to the next theme?
I was just going to add, and part of the challenge sometimes is also bringing people into the realm of possibility, because they're not aware of it, right? Like, and sometimes they've never seen it in place, right? So part of it's like you're almost promising something that they've never seen. So that conversation gets even harder because they don't even know the value of it until they see it, right? But if they haven't seen it, how are you going to invest in it? So it just becomes, it's an interesting challenge sometimes, trying to convince a business about it.
Yeah, right. And the realm of possibility is a good phrase to make it more concrete, right? Otherwise, it's very abstract to them. And I think what Thomas talked about, doing some assessments up front and helping in that sort of at least envisioning where we are in terms of the North Star, because everybody has a North Star. It's getting the map to getting there is the challenge, right? And the immediate next step to be taken to get to that North Star. So that's an interesting sort of segue and into the next sort of theme. But before we jump into that, Katrina, I was just wondering if there were any specific questions that from the audience. Okay, there's one here from Rigo. Respective define. Okay, how these metrics should consider. I think maybe Thomas, I think you do a deeper level of analysis, right, with your assessments. Maybe that question can be addressed to that sort of.
Yeah, I think very important is that you define whatever, like what is a deployment, for an example. You know, what is the, you know, what do you mean by deployment with different applications and different teams and so on? Because if you think about from commit to deploy, then you have to have a certain internal process that defines what is a deployment. And then another thing is like, what is an incident? Where do you store incidents? How do you track incidents? A lot of people say from bug report to whenever the service is online again. I actually prefer that whenever the bug was introduced to whenever it was fixed. So you have to have these internal guardrails in place, which are then agreed by a lot of the different teams that say, okay, we've chosen these metrics to be our North Star, like guideline metrics, and for that purpose we've defined together, this is a deployment, this is an incident, this is a kind of a where the stopwatch starts and ends. You have to have those internal agreements, and that's part of the transformation journey to agree on those.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, metrics, anti-patterns to measure the software delivery. Okay, talking about anti-patterns, we're certainly going to touch on that in the next sort of piece of our conversation. But just leaving last the sort of thought that Martin had about how you define your sort of events there, right? In terms of bug reporting, for instance, when it was discovered to when it was actually introduced, is an important sort of philosophy behind DevOps, right? Where you want to sort of have a continuous delivery sort of pattern where you are testing your code at each stage. So you're eliminating the possibility of introducing bugs into production. And that's some of the practices and management perspectives we'll talk about in the sort of third segment of our conversation. But moving on to sort of the question that was here around the anti-patterns. And I think one of the challenges we have is DevOps get confused for, let's say, for tooling. Like people declare we are on the cloud, we have Azure DevOps, so we are DevOps, or DevOps becomes like a person or a department. So we want to understand what this means, right? In terms of one is it causes confusion about what it's supposed to deliver. And you talked about the North Star, it's supposed to achieve something concrete for the company. And what are the sort of some of the anti-patterns you see, and what are some of the challenges with that, and how we as a community and advocates for software delivery performance improvement can help with that. So maybe Thomas, can I request you to talk about some of the anti-patterns you see as far as DevOps goes?
Sure. I guess for the say a little bit about what Marian Draganov was also asking there. We talk a lot about the business. What if they don't care? I actually try to avoid the word DevOps when I talk with business, because people think about one of the anti-pattern. People think about pipeline. They think about DevOps, they think about pipelines and automation, like infrastructure as code and stuff like that. And I'd rather talk about delivery capability, value, and feedback loop towards customer. I think this was, Martin, what we also discussed before the. So do you want to continue on that?
Yeah. I think we were talking about also like the anti-pattern that you introduce some DevOps team, like which is just responsible for DevOps, and then you create another silo between development and operations, and then they're somehow in the middle, or you have DevOps engineer. I notice quite often, for example, if you look at job descriptions, if you search for DevOps, then you usually find someone who's looking for a DevOps engineer, and that's also usually focusing on only on the tools, or more on the tools than on the surrounding environment, like that we have to do also some collaboration, and that you have to put people together so that you really understand what is in development and what is in operations. And even sometimes they do not even speak the same language, or they use different words for the same stuff. So it's I notice it, if you bring these people together at the beginning, it's really weird, because they do not really understand the problems the other people have, and that's an important point. And you cannot just fix it in by introducing some new silo which is responsible for DevOps, or you cannot fix it just by introducing some tools. Tools help, of course, for automation, they're really useful, and but it's not just implementing a CI/CD pipeline. That's not DevOps. That's one part of DevOps, but it will not solve your problems. For example, if you do not have automated testing, comprehensive testing, then you still have to do the manual regression tests, and that can take weeks. So you're unable to deploy something like every day. So that would really block people. And I think if you introduce some pipeline, it makes problems more obvious. So you introduce it, and then in theory you should be able to deploy every day, but then you find out, okay, there are some other blocking issues or other processes which really prevent you from doing this. And so it can be a start, but it's not the end, the CI/CD pipeline.
You're on mute, sir.
I'm on mute there. Sorry. I was saying that some interesting points there, folks. So we'll get back to that, especially around the business and what business sees at value, and how we can minimize some of the sort of technical discussions and keep it value focused. But we'll move on to Felix for some of your thoughts, Felix, in terms of what you see as anti-patterns, essentially, that minimize the value DevOps can deliver.
Yeah, because sometimes I've seen where the operations team is separated from the development team. And you guys talk about CI/CD pipelines, right? You might be really good at deploying the code constantly over and over again, but like some of our applications, they're very large. So when you have to scale horizontally or vertically, you have to bring the ops team. Once you start bringing in the ops team, then you start slowing stuff down, because you have to provision a new server or set of servers. If you're going to the cloud, that adds another level of maturity that you can add. But when you have that gap, that makes it very difficult to add more hardware in order to support the the loads that you're expecting to come in, right? So if you can tie it together as much as possible and leverage automation, I think someone said infrastructure is code, and really working with the operations team or even blending it, that comes in and becomes even more mature. I know some organizations have it separated because the ops team or the data center teams support multiple businesses in an enterprise, right? So how do you build that gap between that separation between the development teams and the operations team? And it really boils down to partnership, right? And like you guys said, CACDs is one thing because that assumes, or a lot of times that assumes that it's a consistent hardware that you're deploying to. But once you add new hardware to scale up, it throws everything into a flux. And if you don't have that partnership, it's going to be very, very difficult. And that's something that you have to work through.
Yeah, that's I like that that what you said about partnership. I just did a big assessment on a bank. They're not actually a bank, but they provide banking systems. And there was the sysadmin guys. They had been doing their thing for 20, 30 years. They have a huge mainframe where the business logic is. They have Java Spring Boot applications on top. And the sysadmin guys called the Java developers Nintendo guys, who get annoyed if their PlayStation is of a different color or wrong color or something. And then the Nintendo guys that talk about these old goons who are somewhere in the basement, and they just kind of stand in the way of every development thing that they want to do. And the partnership was not there. And we realized that you cannot let the people who do the Java development to the mainframe engine room. That's just not possible and doesn't make sense. So the way what we suggested to them is that every time you start a new feature, every time you start something new, invite the sysadmin guys to sit next to you when you're talking about the things. They will bring up those non-functional requirements and all the stuff that they want to make sure that are taken care of all the way in the beginning. And they get the information about what are you planning to push into their lap in the end. So even if they couldn't do an end-to-end CI/CD pipeline, they could at least discuss with them and create this partnership where they respect each other's work rather than, talk with these kind of nasty nicknames and all that. So I think partnership is a crucial thing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And on the theme of sort of how do you manage all this complexity, right? It's and we have to acknowledge this is not easy. This is a effort that happens at multiple layers and involves multiple dimensions and multiple groups and sets of people with different mindsets and different sort of culture and approaches to work, right? So I think we have to be humbled by that. I think that's the first acknowledgement we have to make. And the second thing, I think your point about having some assessments to define where things are to at a granular level, so it's relatable, and have promoting this concept of partnership. And I think the sort of thing that I took away from what you said, Thomas, is about the North Star, right? And having that sort of end goal in mind, and what you mentioned as well, Felix, in terms of a business value, and similar to what Martin said. And I think it really is about delivering value to the business and making it very context sensitive to the business, which is what we want to talk about in our last sort of theme around this topic, is the sort of cultural transformation that needs to happen, and the type of leadership that is required to help achieve a DevOps transformation that will not only improve the software delivery performance, but it will also make a big difference to organizational performance. Because at the end of the day, this is all a means to an end. Because as you said, Thomas, you don't even want to mention DevOps to a business stakeholder. You want to talk in terms of business value. So maybe your experiences in some of the cultural challenges and the type of leader you require. DORA proposes some sort of model, and I think it's useful in terms of defining how you can assess your cultural type. And it also defines a a sort of pattern for a transformational leader, right? In terms of the vision and in terms of enabling people. And maybe we can start with that sort of thing around, from the conversation you had, Felix, about partnership. Maybe we can start with you and how we can kind of bring this culture of collaboration and partnership.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. Part of it is also because right now I share the partnership with the ops team, right? If you have some sort of separation there, right? But the other partnership that you really need to have is with the business, right? I think, Thomas, you used the word non-functional requirements. So the business a lot of times is so focused on getting those new features in, right? And it's all feature, but all the love and caring that you have to give to the application to make sure that you're up to date on any like libraries that you're using, staying up to date with whatever hardware, like if your OS versions, staying up with that. A lot of times I've seen the business that they focus so much on the feature development that they don't touch the infrastructure that you're running on for many months, and they don't see the value in it because it's not new features that you're providing to the business. But if you don't touch that, your application gets brittle and it could break at some point, right? So that voice of the ops team has to come up to the business, right? And you have to allow some of that non-functional stuff to get incorporated as part of that. And I've seen businesses where they have not allowed it, and they finally make the change once it breaks, right? Where the server crashes or there's a big security issue that gets escalated. But finding that balance and communicating and giving that avenue to make sure that some of these changes get incorporated are so critical, right? It's not just about feature development, which is what the business usually looks for.
Mm-hmm. And is that sort of the part of the cultural transformation that has to go on?
100%. And you need leaders to have a voice for them and empower them, right? And really transform, like, hey, make sure if you see that there is not, in the business cases as they're coming in, as they're planning for the next year or the next quarter or whatever, you as a leader need to make sure that you basically create that umbrella so that is a voice. As a technology leader, you have to bridge that gap with them and be the voice for them. And that's the cultural balance that you have to bring. Sometimes it exists, sometimes it doesn't, right? And how fast you adjust to the needs of the business, this is critical to have that in there. But developing that culture where they're incorporating these type of things is critical.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key themes that we took away from a lot of these conversations. Technical debt and addressing it is a first-class citizen. It's not something that you can relegate, because your ability to deploy features in the future is going to be threatened if you don't address it, and that's value for the business. And I think the onus is on the technology leadership team to make that case.
And I know we haven't touched on it, but like security, right? Like security is such a big issue, right? So there's so many tools where you can do static code analysis on security stuff, right? And there's stuff that you really have, like day zero stuff that you have to remediate immediately. Until it gets to that point, they're ignoring it. But the day that you have a data breach within your application because there was a security hole that you didn't fix, that's when you react, right? You can't allow that to happen. So again, that adds to like delivering value is security also. And people are sometimes the businesses don't see that as value until they get hit by it.
True. And that's an important point. And I think it's part of some of the larger conversations we are having as advocates of this whole domain is around value stream and how we can integrate all these sort of aspects like security, technical debt as items that are as valuable as features and bug fixes. So more on that, folks. We'll touch offline on that. But coming back to, there was a question here from Cairo, and he was talking about agile maturity at a squad level. How do you approach measuring the agile maturity at squad level? Maybe we can weave that into the conversation around the cultural sort of transformation and leadership required. I think one of the things that I just want to, maybe it's a good point, and maybe we can start with Martin or Thomas on this, is kind of this sort of this apparent divide between the agile folks and the DevOps folks, right? And that seems to be an evolving anti-pattern where the developers are doing, they say they're agile, and the DevOps guys are your renamed ops guys. But I guess the value of agile is now to have code and features and value delivered as quickly to the customer, right? And for that, you need to address agility downstream as well. And I think that's what the point he was making here, as Cairo was saying, how do you approach measuring the agile maturity at a squad level? I think the simple answer is the definition of done has to change. The definition done has to change from it's demoed to your internal stakeholders to code running in production and delivering value to the business. And for that, agile and DevOps have to come together. So with that, I think maybe Thomas, you can talk about your experiences with the sort of cultural and leadership transformations that are needed to get end-to-end value delivery.
I'll pass to Martin for a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, Irfan, what you said is right. It's the definition of done. That's something which should be changed in the context of agile and DevOps. And a lot of companies change the definition of done to it's only done when the customer is able to use the software and you get data back from your application and from the customer. Only then it's done. It's not done when it's committed to the source code system. It's not done if it's tested. It's only done if it's really running in production and providing data about how your customers are using your software. I think that's a point. And what Felix mentioned about business, I think DORA metrics is really useful to help you understand what is your reaction time. How fast can you react through some outside events like some security vulnerability or some other problems, and how fast can you fix? So we have these 4 metrics, and they define how fast can you react to something, how often can you deploy, what's the time until you can restore your service. And in particular for security, it's really important to be able to fix issues really quickly. And that's only possible if you are able to deploy daily, because otherwise, if you deploy once a month, that's already too slow for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think maturity, again, capability on a squad level or an organization level is, as you said, Martin, we can measure how quickly can we do things, how quickly can we react, how quickly can we pivot, all these things. That's very good. But are we doing the right things? Are we really doing the things that should be done for business value to improve? Or one of my favorite topics is developer experience. So really kind of how happy our developers are, because everybody knows a happy developer creates happy code, and a happy code creates great features. So in that sense, I usually think that DevOps is just one way of reaching agility, and agility itself is making developers happy. They don't have to context switch so much. They can get the immediate feedback for something they're proud of. They did something. So really kind of going back to, are your developers happy? What's your retention? What's your churn with 10x developers? These kind of things. I think those are very important metrics as well. And I think a lot of companies are starting to realize, well, not only that they're digital companies, I mean, everybody is a digital company these days, but also that they will need those developers, those great developers, and the happier those guys are, the more value they can create your customers. So really, I know it's a bit of a fluffy metric or a fluffy topic, but I think it's very important and interesting on developer happiness.
True. And I think it's true. Although it appears fluffy, right? It's really indicative of where the value is created. The value is created through these technical people and the engineers and the developers. And it's a huge waste of their time if they are spending time fixing issues, right, in production, because then you're taking away their capacity to do innovative work, and you're getting them to do work that the machines are designed to do. And that is the whole sort of philosophy behind lean and DevOps, right, where you want to get the work that the humans do best, the creative work for the humans to do, and leave the sort of routine work to the tools. And I think making that change is kind of the challenge, right? Because people, as we saw, there are silos, and there's low-down developers in terms of doing additional work. And I think there was a question that you brought up, Felix, about how you scale some of these, and there are some newer sort of guidance around this in terms of Teams topology has come up with some sort of way of scaling from a let's say a horizontal perspective, and separating out areas of concerns, and so cognitive load is minimized. And I think the bigger sort of transition, I believe, and maybe the cultural transformation plays into is to move away from this concept of project to actually moving on to product-based sort of development and end-to-end sort of value delivery, right? Because one of the challenges is that when you are in a project mode, you're always going to be working towards a deadline, and the ability to kind of think back and start releasing in smaller batches goes away. So I was wondering what your thoughts are and what you see in this sort of area where you have a big upfront sort of planning going on, the funding is there for a project, and then there are teams that are put together to deliver on that project, and they deliver it, and they have a deadline to meet, and there's a rush to get things done. Does that create sort of a lot of challenges in terms of delivery, and it left to ops to clean up all the stuff later on? I don't know if that resonates with you, Felix. Do you see that as a cultural transformation that has to go through?
It resonates a ton. I know that sometimes since it's a project plan that's like a year out, they become hard commitments.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to deliver pieces incrementally and adjusting and then figuring out what the actual data is going to be, the pressure starts mounting and mounting and mounting, and the stress level gets very high, right? Just because that becomes a commitment, right? So a lot of it is when you try to project, right? And we're going into agile now, but like projecting what we're going to deliver in a year is very, very difficult. It's incrementally is what you want to start doing, right? And I think your conversation about switching from project to product based is key for that. You have to adjust for that so that you can start delivering value to your customers, instead of saying, hey, we're going to have this done in 1 year or year and a half. You start providing value immediately, and you start changing the focus from a product perspective instead of having that long deadline, right? And that is something that everywhere that I've gone to always has that challenge. And it's trying to change that mentality is something that we still have to work through. Constantly.
Yeah, no, and that's a big passion for us, and we are big advocates of within DevOps as well. I think it's part of the continuing journey from Agile DevOps and the whole lean movement. And I think we're doing a quick time check here, Katrina. We have 5 minutes left, Katrina says.
Maybe just a quick comment to Marianne's note about DevOps team is per default or not only comprised of dev. You're very right, but I think eventually people will become developers. Like if you empower people enough and your framework is robust enough, think about low code, no code, these kind of trends that we are going towards. I think oftentimes people become these citizen developers, and even sysadmins are kind of develop. I'd like to see a future where everybody can do the creative work, not only the Java guru. I know this is a bit of a far-fetched, but just a comment.
No, that's a good comment there. And I think the other thing also, while we go quickly on this concept, this topic of a developer and the developer experience, right? Happiness metric is good, But I think the developers also will eventually, and they've taken on more responsibility, right? Now the team itself will eventually own the business case for the product. And that's what you see in the digital native companies, where it's the developers are, the code is a means to an end. And if you can get a business result with minimum code, so be it. And that's what lean product development is all about. So I think the sort of shift in the way software is delivered and consumed has implications for every job role, including developers. And happiness is one metric, and delivering business results will become another metric, I think. With that, Marianne, that looks like that answered Marianne's question. So anybody, Martin, your sort of closing comments, anything that you have, and maybe we can then have Felix say something.
Yeah, maybe just quickly, also related to the last point. I think that's probably what we will see in the future. That what Tuomas has said, that we will have operations, and they will also be more go in the direction of developing. And because all the manual repetitive work that can be automated, so you will not have to do it again. And if we have infrastructure as code and we're using that really, then it's also less work for that. And I think we're already seeing that in the direction of SRE, or site reliability engineering, where you usually have software developers which help the development teams to create software which is really running stable and reliable with high quality, and they're also testing it and recover automatically. So that's already development work what they are doing. And usually I heard from Google that they're taking the best developers and they're putting these guys in the SRE teams because they're really good at it and they understand it. And they share the responsibility. So if something is going wrong in operations, then the development team has to hand over some members of the development team to the operation guys so that they can fix it together. Sure. I think that's an important point. So we will probably see that more in the future.
Yeah. It's and Felix, maybe any last comments, Felix, my friend?
No, it just I know that I've been with WTW for 7 years, and I know our journey has been, it's amazing to see where we started, where we're at now, like that journey, and seeing the progress that you make. It's a lot of fun. You see the value, you see the transformation that's happening, but like, I don't think that journey ever ends. I think it's an ever evolving journey, and it's great to be a part of that.
Yeah, with that, all right, Katrina, hi there.
Hello, back again. Yes. So thank you, everybody, for. I mean, it's a big topic to discuss in 1 hour, but we had a great discussion, and I think a lot of points were covered. We had some good questions also, and Marianne also, thank you for contributing to the questions. There was mentioning, is DevOps actually working in a project? Felix, that was, I don't know if you can quickly answer that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of projects where it's working. The transformation has been significant, and you can see it from two ways: is how fast you're delivering and providing value, and then from a maturity assessment perspective, if you're using that, you can see the progress if you start from the beginning and measure that. So it is working. Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining today, and thank you to the audience. Thank you to all our speakers, Irfan for moderating today's discussion, and Thomas, Martin, and Felix for joining. It's been very insightful. This is being recorded, and we would love, if any of you would like to participate in a webinar in the future, we'd be happy to hear from you, even as a co-branded event. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future, and we'll keep in touch. If you would like to connect with our speakers today, please do feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and ask more questions. And interesting perspective, Felix, eye-opening for me. Thanks. That's from Marianne. So thank you, and look forward to another DASA webinar. And if you want to find out more information about our awards, as I mentioned, please go to devopsagileskills.org, and you'll find how to nominate a project, or be a judge for our awards next year.
All right. Super.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye for now.